Hello, Peter the Cat here. Today I'm going to review this movie, Garfield's Pet Force. It's based on the book series from the 90s, and I've got a history of Pet Force video, so check that out if you haven't seen it already. I'm going to guess that Jim Davis must have seen The Dark Knight and Iron Man, and that's why he decided to, capitalize off the superhero craze. It's too bad that Jim Davis never decided to revisit his original idea for a Garfield movie, Garfield's Judgment Day. Yep, I still got the copy I swiped in the pausing vault. I bet Jim Davis has forgotten about it already. Let's talk about the special features on the DVD quick. There are none. Seriously, there's no interviews about how Jim Davis adapted the books to the movie, just nothing. Which is a shame because a couple years later, Kaboom Studios did a comic book of Pet Force, and this has interviews with Gary Barker, one of the original illustrators for Pet Force, and several other people that worked on the comic. It's a shame. A comic book has better special features than the DVD. What we do get on this DVD, though, is a AAA commercial with Garfield in it.
Here's an important message for moms and dads from AAA.
Vehicle crashes are a leading cause of death for children, yet many are preventable.
I don't know why this is on the DVD. Why'd you do this commercial, Garfield? Oh, I see. Garfield says it was due to contractual obligations with Jim Davis. Are these the same contractual obligations that had you do Cartoon All-Stars to the Rescue and Garfield Fit, that game where you exercise? Completely out of character for you. Okay, enough side stuff. Let's just talk about the movie itself. It opens with a mock Star Wars crawl, and it's actually pretty silly, so the movie's off to a good start, I think.
Does anybody really read these things? I mean, come on, people. If you're freeze-framing this scene just so you can go and read the scroll, what's up with that?
An evil-looking ship flies over the camera and looks for directions to planet Dorkon. I thought it was weird that this sign actually says Dork out loud. We then cut to planet Dorkon, and oh my gosh, the CGI looks really awful. A lookalike of Wally the Inventor runs into a palace and meets the ruler of Dorkon, Emperor John. He has found the Klopman crystal, a reference to the Klopman diamond from Garfield and Friends. He plans to use it as a power source in his new invention, the molecular scramble gun, or MoScram for short. Professor Wally pretty much replaces Sorcerer Binky from the books as Emperor John's advisor. I'm guessing they did this because just reusing Wally's model would be easier than just, making a new model for Sorcerer Binky. Professor Wally then demonstrates the power of the gun by scrambling the palace lawyer and dog. Oh my gosh, these models look ugly. Wally also explains that when a being is scrambled, they will obey every order given to them by whoever wields the gun. Geez, that's a really sinister design. Emperor John notices a super scramble button on the gun and asks what it does, but Wally says it hasn't been tested yet. I wonder if that button will be important later on. Emperor John has no interest in the gun, though. He's more concerned about finding a wife to be his queen so he can continue his royal bloodline. And he says he's too dorky even for Dorkon women. The moment Emperor John says he might have to marry an off-worlder, right on cue, our villain Vetvix breaks into the castle. Emperor John immediately falls in love with Vetvix and asks her if he'll marry him. Vetvix is voiced by Vanessa Marshall, who you might recognize as the voice of Gamora from the animated Guardians of the Galaxy, and hundreds of other voice roles, and she hams it up a lot as Vetvix. Vetvix's design here is pretty much the same as what you see in the books, although I think the yellow and purple color scheme is kind of ugly looking. And there are a couple changes from the books also. Vetvix and Emperor John were never in love in the books. And also, for some reason, I guess Jim Davis wanted to cut out magic because it was too fantastical or something. Vetvix in the movie is no longer a magician, and she's not a scientist either. Which is a shame because I thought Vetvix with magic powers and everything is more dangerous and would have been really awesome to see in the movie. I think it would have been more appropriate if Vetvix was the one who built the MoScram gun and not Professor Wally. Professor Wally reluctantly marries Emperor John and Vetvix. And we get this pretty funny scene where Vetvix refuses to kiss John, so she makes him kiss one of her henchmen instead. That was a pretty funny gag. Vetvix demands the keys to the kingdom, and right away, she uses them to steal the MoScram gun. It's too bad that the movie Frozen hadn't come out yet. That would have taught Emperor John not to fall in love at first sight. We then get this silly scene of one of Emperor John's guards doing all these ninja moves to threaten Vetvix and her henchmen. That actually was kind of funny. Vetvix uses the gun to zap all the guards, and then she gloats to Emperor John how she'll use the MoScram to conquer the universe.
But honey, if you're off conquering the universe, when will we have time for our honeymoon?
Wow, that was another good line. I'm surprised to say that some of the humor in this movie actually does feel very Garfield-esque. Professor Wally secretly calls Pet Force, and we get these awesome character introductions for each of them. And just to recap their superpowers, Odious has a stun tongue, Starlina has freeze vision, Abnormal has super speed, and Garzuka has gamma radiated hairballs. Oh man, this is gonna be so awesome! I had so much fun reading the fight scenes of these books. I can't wait to see how they play out in a movie. And then, within 1 minute of being introduced, everyone but Garzuka gets zapped by the MoScram gun. What? Garfield, that was lame! What was the point of Jim Davis retooling these characters for the movie if they're just going to be defeated so fast. Garzuka manages to hack a gamma-radiated hairball at the Mosgram gun, causing the Klopman crystal to fall out, and he catches it and takes it away from Vetvix. I should note that in the books, Garzuka's hairballs were much deadlier. He could cause explosions and melt metal. If Garzuka had melted the Mosgram gun, then this movie would have been over in like 10 minutes. Professor Wally opens a secret passageway that allows him and Garzuka to escape, and since they can't change Pet Force back without the Mosgram gun, Professor Wally suggests that Garzuka create a new Pet Force using DNA matches from another universe, and it just so happens that Odie, Arlene, and Nermal have matching DNA to become Starlina, Odious, and Abnormal. Garzuka jumps into a generic-looking spaceship to make his escape, and it's kind of a shame they don't use the Lightspeed Lasagna, which was the ship that belonged to Pet Force in the books. Garzuka manages to escape just as Vetvix arrives, and she swears she's going to find Garzuka if it's the last thing she does. We then cut to John's backyard, where he's having a barbecue with all of his pets. The Pet Force adventure we've been seeing is actually a comic book Nermal is reading. Nermal is a big fan of Pet Force and can't wait for the next issue to come out, and Garfield's like, "Oh, Nermal, comic books are silly. How can you believe any of this stuff is real?" Huh, this seems really familiar. Where have I seen it before? Oh, now I remember! It's from the first Pet Force book, The Outrageous Origin. It also has a scene where Nermal is reading a Pet Force comic and Garfield's like, "Oh, how can you believe, these things are real?" And if you expect me to complain once again, "Oh, Jim Davis is being unoriginal," nope, I'm not going to make that complaint because this is the only scene in the movie that resembles anything from the books. Everything else from this point on, it's a completely original story. John then interjects and asks Garfield, what if superheroes were real? Wouldn't it be really cool to go around helping people? And I think this is a weird question for John to ask, because we've seen this superhero dude flying around as a background character in the past 2 Garfield movies. Garfield reacts negatively to John's question, and he's like, "Oh, I wouldn't want to do that. I don't want to get involved in other people's problems." And this is where the movie introduces Garfield's fatal flaw and the lesson he'll eventually have to learn. That sometimes you have to get involved in other people's problems. I think it's nice that Jim Davis wants to, try and give Garfield a character arc in each of these movies, but they're never really well executed. Garfield gets real, has Garfield learn reality is where your heart is, which sounds like something out of The Matrix. A more coherent moral for that movie would have been, don't run away from your responsibilities. And then Garfield's Fun Fest has Garfield learn that there is no easy way to success, and you gotta remember to respect your audience as an entertainer. But that also fell flat because the journey Garfield went on wasn't very good. Let's see if Garfield's Pet Force handles its moral any better. John decides to leave for the studio early. However, Garfield's hungry and wants to eat more hot dogs, so he tells them he'll stay behind and catch up with them later. While John's driving to the studio, he lets Nermal get out to buy the newest copy of Pet Force from a newsstand, and while Nermal is reading the comic in the car, he's surprised to see that the barbecue they were at earlier is in the comic book, meaning the events of the comic book are happening right now in the present. And then right at that moment, Garzuka jumps out of his spaceship and emerges into the comic strip world. This scene raises a lot of weird questions, Garfield gets real established that Garfield lives in a comic strip world that is read by people in the real world, and then this movie establishes that the comic strip world has its own comics, those comics have their own worlds in them, and it's this is really confusing. Did, Jim Davis consult the late Stephen Hawking when he was writing this movie? Maybe that's what reality is where your heart is means. There's so many multiple universes in Garfield's world, just pick whichever one you're most comfortable with. Garzuka heads to John's house, and we get this kind of silly scene where Garzuka is too big to fit through the doorway. He heads into the backyard where he meets Garfield, and Garfield is totally shocked to see that Pet Force is actually real. Garzuka explains the situation to Garfield, that he's looking for Odie, Nermal, and Arlene, and Garfield gives him directions to the comic strip studio. Garzuka then gives Garfield a very important task, to keep the Klopman crystals safe for him. It's nice that the movie is trying to show that you don't have to have superpowers to be a hero, but still, I don't think it's smart of Garzuka to, leave the plot MacGuffin with a character that can't defend himself. Meanwhile, Vetvix is looking for Garzuka, and she runs a CAT scan, get it, to look for his DNA trace. We also see that Vetvix is keeping Professor Wally and Emperor John are prisoners, in case she needs to ask them questions about the Mosgram gun. 2 problems with this. 1, she never does ask them any questions, and 2, why does she have them tied up? Why can't she, put them in a holding cell or some other technologically advanced prison? The CAT scan detects Garzuka in the comic strip world, so Vetvix passes through the galactic barrier into the comic strip world to look for Garzuka. Hey, how come Vetvix gets to take her spaceship into the comic strip world, but Garzuka didn't do the same? Meanwhile, back at the comic strip studio, Nermal is still reading the Pet Force comic book, because every time new events happen, new panels are added to the comic book. And then a panel appears of Garzuka standing behind him, and he looks behind, and Garzuka's right there in the comic strip studio. Now, I was thinking that Nermal would keep this comic book on him, maybe use it to spy on Vetvix, and then after the adventure is over, the comic would be completely filled, and Nermal would be like, "Oh, this is the best Pet Force comic ever, because I was in it." But nope, this is the last time we see that comic book. Why'd Jim Davis just forget about it? This comic book could have been really useful. Garzuka then explains the situation to Nermal, Arlene, and Odie, that he needs a replacement Pet Force, and he gives them all DNA serums that'll give them superpowers.
What if it turns us into freaks? freaks. Sweet!
I like that freak joke. That was actually pretty funny. And then this good joke is followed by a bad joke. Seriously, Garfield? I thought you'd be above toilet humor like this. What? That fart joke was your favorite joke in the movie? Why? I don't care how many kids liked it during test screenings. This is just gross. The DNA serums don't work immediately, and they have to wait for them to take effect. Meanwhile, back at the backyard, Garfield's just still lying around, being lazy, drinking lemonade, but then Vetvix's ship appears above him. The scanners aboard Vetvix's ship have mistaken Garfield for Garzuka, and he's abducted aboard, and Vetvix demands, "Where's the crystal?" thinking that Garfield is just Garzuka in disguise. Garfield quickly hides the crystal in his cup of lemonade, disguising it with the ice cubes, and when he refuses to tell Vetvix where the Klopman crystal is, she then threatens Garfield with torture. You know, for kids! Back at the studio, John sees that Betty the script lady has made a happiness zone as a break area, and stepping into it induces happiness. Oh my gosh, the way John laughs looks creepy. This is kind of a weird thing to add to the movie. I wonder if it'll be important later. The director then calls for everyone to be on set, and that's when Arlene, Odie, and Nermal come out and they have Garzuka following them, and everyone sees Garzuka and they're like really confused, like, whoa, did Garfield start working out? Betty the script lady immediately falls in love with Garzuka and starts trying to hug him and everything. So this is the second time Betty has fallen in love with a handsome cat. First it was with Ramon in the previous movie, now it's Garzuka. Hey Garfield, do you think Betty would fall in love with me? I bet my necklace looks really sexy. Back aboard Vetvix's ship, we see she's torturing Garfield by twisting him like a Twizzler. However, the torture method isn't working because of cartoon physics. Vetvix gets thirsty and decides to have some of Garfield's lemonade. This causes Garfield to panic, and he's like, no, I'll tell you where the crystal is if you give me the lemonade. Garfield drinks the lemonade and tries to pretend the crystal is just an ice cube he's sucking on, but Vetvix isn't fooled, so she dims the lights and sees the crystal glowing in Garfield's mouth. She takes the crystal back, repowers the Mosgram gun, and vows to find Garzuka again, leaving Garfield very sad he couldn't stop Vetvix. Vetvix's ship then flies over to the comic strip studio, and she breaks in and starts to zap everyone there. Now I thought that maybe Vetvix would threaten to take over the real world next, but that never happens. Garzuka manages to take John, Odie, Nermal, and Arlene out of the studio and escort them to safety, while Eli the technician dude retreats into the wall. Hey, how come he didn't take anyone with him? What a jerk! We see beloved characters like Billy Bear and Randy Rabbit get zapped by Vetvix. No! I'm lying, they're not beloved characters. It's been 3 movies and I still don't know anything about them. While Vetvix's henchmen are distracted by watching Vetvix make new zombies, Garfield's still lamenting that he failed to stop Vetvix, but Professor Wally tells Garfield there's still hope. He can help make a difference. He tells Garfield to take his monocle and put it on the window, and Garfield tries to do that, but one of Vetvix's henchmen grabs him. But Garfield manages to sneak the monocle on the window. Now the monocle is supposed to act like a magnifying glass to burn the ropes off, but Garfield has to hope that the ship moving around doesn't cause the monocle to fall off or move out of the view of the sun. Vetvix's henchman asks Vetvix what he should do with Garfield, and Vetvix says just to get rid of him. So Garfield's like thrown into a garbage chute and he's shot out, and he just so happens to land in the alley where Garzuka, John, and everyone else have taken refuge. Garfield explains to Garzuka how he lost the crystal, and Garzuka just easily forgives Garfield. Yeah, you may have just doomed all of comic strip world, Garfield, but don't worry, we all make mistakes. Odie suddenly starts to twitch violently, and it looks like he might finally transform, only to let out a giant burp. Hey Odie, I think a burp that big is already a superpower. But then the DNA serums take effect for real, and Odie, Nermal, and Arlene all transform into the new Pet Force.
Do not be fearful, Arlene. It won't hurt a bit. At least, I don't think so.
I'm surprised to see Jim Davis insert a boobies joke into his movie. It's probably a reference back to the 90s Pet Force trailer where Arlene also grows big breasts. Hey Garfield, is Jim Davis a secret furry? If he is, maybe I should send some of my issues of Yarf magazine to him. We get a brief scene of Pet Force testing out their new powers, and once they're comfortable with them, Garzuka hatches a plan. They're gonna go over to a radio tower and use the antenna on top as a harpoon to bring down Vetvix's ship and somehow get the gun out of her possession. Maybe Garzuka shouldn't have abandoned his spaceship earlier. That would have made this task a lot easier. Pet Force has to hurry, though, because Vetvix's ship pulls out of the studio and she starts to look for Garzuka. While Pet Force makes their escape, Vetvix notices that Garfield and John are still in the alley, and she decides to zap them. Eli, who's been watching from the safe room and has overheard Pet Force's plan, tries to save Garfield and John by sucking them into a vent. Eli manages to save Garfield, but unfortunately John is zapped. Garfield then goes through the vent, and whoops! I mixed this up with footage from the first Bill Murray Garfield movie. Garfield lands into the safe room, and while he's safe with Eli, the both of them have no idea how they can possibly stop Vetvix now. Vetvix then starts going crazy and zapping tons of people left and right. And oh my gosh, everyone here looks horribly modeled and animated. Like, this is almost food fight levels of bad. Hey, if you look really carefully, you can tell like some of the people here aren't even scrambled. Like, they're just animated to walk like zombies. Yeah, I know this is cheap CGI, but couldn't they like make it less obvious by putting all the grotesque looking characters up front and the less scrambled characters in back. So Pet Force races through the town and tries to outrun all the zombies that are around them. And when they finally get to the radio tower, they run up the stairs and Starlina tries to stall the zombies by freezing a couple of them with her vision. Aw man, this is looking really cool, and I can't wait to see the fight scene this builds up to. Back at the comic strip studio, Garfield and Eli search through the wreckage for survivors, and Eli chastises Garfield for not coming to the comic strip studio earlier with Garzuka, basically spelling out the moral of the movie again, that it's important to get involved. Finding strange that of all the new characters introduced in these movies, Garfield has the most connection with Eli the technician dude. He kind of acts like Garfield's conscience, giving him advice. And if Garfield had more interactions like these with other characters, like Billy Bear and Randy Rabbit, then I probably would have cared more when Garfield's forced to see his friends get zombified by Vetvix. Garfield has lost all hope of ever beating Vetvix, but then Betty, Bonita, and Wally emerge from the wreckage, and they assure Garfield not to give up. Eli then hacks into a camera at the radio tower and shows that Pet Force is surrounded by zombies. Garfield is then filled with new resolve, that he's going to get involved and help save the day. His first order of business is to give themselves a name, the Crazy Crew. Yeah, in a movie called Garfield's Pet Force, Garfield never actually leads Pet Force. Therefore, this should have been the movie's title. While Garfield and his crazy crew hatch a plan to help Pet Force, we cut to Pet Force on the top of the radio tower, and we see them fighting the zombies. Aw man, Garfield. 51 minutes into this movie, now we're gonna see a real Pet Force action scene. Wait a minute, Garzuka and Odious are using their powers on the zombies? Hold it! Yeah, sorry Garfield to harp on this. While I want to see an awesome Pet Force action scene, seeing Garzuka and Odious go after these zombies kinda doesn't feel right, because when I read the fourth Pet Force book, Menace of the Mutinator, where Vetvix captures 4 members of Pet Force and turns them into a monster called the Mutinator, Garzuka in this book doesn't want to fight the Mutinator, because while the Mutinator may be evil, it's still made up of the parts of his friends. So I don't think it's a good idea for Garzuka, whose gamma-radiated hairballs cause explosions, and Odious, whose stun tongue can be pretty destructive, using them on civilians, even if they are zombies. I think this could have easily been solved if Jim Davis threw in some of the side villains from the books, have Space Pirate and Caniner be the ones directing the zombies for Vetvix, and then have Starlina and Abnormal fight the zombies, while the stronger members of Pet Force, Garzuka and Odious, go after Vetvix's henchmen. That all said, though, is this fight still enjoyable to watch? Well, no, because just like the first one, it's over within a minute. Odie, Nermal, and Arlene's cartoon bodies can't withstand their superpowers for very long, leaving Garzuka to fight by himself. Oh, not again. I can't imagine how Garzuka must feel. He just went into another universe to find a new Pet Force and they don't even last a minute. Suddenly Garfield and Wally appear, pretending to be zombies in order to blend in, and they put up a poster of Vetvix to command the zombies to stop their assault. Wally throws Pet Force a blanket they can hide under. Is that really gonna fool anyone? Garfield and Wally then disguise themselves as Garzuka and lure the zombies away from Pet Force so they can make their way to the top of the radio tower. Vetvix's spaceship just so happens to be flying nearby, and when she sees all of her zombies on the top of the radio tower, she thinks they may have found Garzuka. Meanwhile, the real Garzuka has Pet Force hide under that blanket again to let them recover. Really? Is a blanket gonna fool Vetvix's scanners when they can scan someone from across the universe? Garzuka yanks out the radio tower's antenna and throws it as a harpoon into Vetvix's ship. The other members of Pet Force then come out and help Garzuka pull the ship down. Meanwhile, Garfield leads all the zombies into a trap where they fall into the basement of the comic strip studio. Okay, as dumb as this plan is, I much prefer this non-violent solution rather than Pet Force just beating up civilians. Pet Force manages to pull down Vetvix's ship, and with their strength regained, they're ready to have the final showdown with Vetvix. After 2 disappointing fight scenes, Jim Davis can't screw up Pet Force fighting their arch-enemy, can he? So Abnormal runs at Vetvix, Odious tries to throw some debris at her, and then Garzuka takes her out with a gamma-radiated hairball. Yeah, that's it. No prolonged struggle. Starlina didn't even get to do anything. Jeez, another disappointment. But then the super scramble on the gun is activated, Vetvix picks it back up, and she shoots Pet Force in. Oh my god, that is horrendous! I mean, okay, this scramble thing is probably supposed to resemble the Mutinator from the books, but honestly, which is cooler? Book Mutinator? Or whatever this is? Anyway, Professor Wally and Emperor John finally get out of their ropes, they overcome Vetvix's henchmen, and then they take control of her ship, and Vetvix falls off back onto the radio tower. Vetvix gets enraged and decides to see what Super Scramble mode can do. Now, I was thinking that Super Scramble mode was gonna, do something really crazy, like warp all of reality, but nothing like that happens. Instead, Vetvix uses the gun to create a giant monster made of several buildings and scrap, and oh my gosh, just... really? What movie am I watching, Garfield? Pet Force combines superheroes with sci-fi, zombies, and now kaiju? It's like Jim Davis is throwing everything but the kitchen sink into this script. Vetvix commands her monster to go after her ship and get it back, unaware that the mutated Pet Force is now trailing behind her. Aw man, Garfield, I wish Pet Force hadn't been scrambled. It would have been so awesome. The climax of this movie was Pet Force fighting that monster. I mean, they never got to fight any kaiju in the books. It would have been something new. The crazy crew watches the giant kaiju destroying the city, and they're unsure how they're going to stop Vetvix now. Eli's computer suddenly picks up that Vetvix's ship has landed outside the studio, and the crazy crew all goes out expecting a fight, only to be surprised to see Emperor John and Professor Wally come out and greet them. Vetvix's kaiju is fast approaching, so Garfield tells Eli to take the crazy crew to safety, because he's gonna get involved big time now. Garfield has Wally fly him over the kaiju, and he jumps out and tries to distract Vetvix. The giant kaiju then briefly grabs the ship, only to accidentally break the wings off. Whoops! Garfield tries to taunt Vetvix. However, the kaiju attacks Garfield, forcing him to run away.
Wow, Garfield, in your previous movie you couldn't climb a mountain-high ladder, but now you're able to be an action hero? That's unexpected.
Geez, the cheap CGI really looks apparent during the climax. I mean, when you get close-up looks of the kaiju and the debris that's falling over, like, you can see that it looks very boxy and the textures are all pixelated. It looks like a cheap video game. Okay, I gotta say, this one scene of Garfield trying to catch a hot dog in slow motion is kind of funny. Is it just me, or does it feel like Garfield eats more hot dogs in these movies than lasagna? The mutated Pet Force suddenly appears, and it gives Garfield an idea. He tricks Garzuka into firing gamma-radiated hairballs at the kaiju's legs, causing it to halt. And then he baits Odious into firing his stun tongue, and Garfield wraps the tongue around the kaiju's legs, causing it to fall over AT-AT style. Vetvix is thrown off the kaiju, and Garfield manages to catch the Mosgram gun, and he uses it to undo the monster and returns Pet Force back to normal. Yay, Garfield! You saved the day without any superpowers, making Pet Force look completely useless! Garfield then rushes into the comic strip studio, cornering Vetvix into that happiness zone thing. Garfield then zaps Vetvix, causing her to merge with the happy zone and turning her nice.
Vetvix is lucky she didn't become some sort of happiness mutant.
Garfield then undoes all the zombies, and Professor Wally promises that once he unscrambles everyone on Dorkon, they'll destroy the gun so it can never be used for evil again.
Hey Garfield, I know that you saved the day, but won't all the comic strips have to go on hiatus while Comic Strip World is repaired? It's like after Garfield gets real, the real world doesn't matter anymore.
The reformed Vetvix then asks Emperor John for forgiveness, and Emperor John is like, sure, why not? And then the both of them make out on the floor. Jeez, why don't you guys get a room? Garzuka then has Odie, Nermal, and Arlene take serums that return them to their normal cartoon bodies, and Nermal is the most reluctant to take his serum. However, Garzuka makes it up to him by throwing him a spare abnormal suit. Aw, that was kind of touching. The wings on Vetvix's ship are repaired, and Pet Force and everyone else return to their own universe, and Eli broadcasts Emperor John and Vetvix renewing their vows to the comic strip world.
Wait, are Vetvix's henchmen at the ceremony? Why are they okay with Vetvix just being good now? I don't know about you, Garfield, but this just feels like too happy of an ending. Having Vetvix be good and not have to pay for any of her crimes. It's not what I expected at all after the last Pet Force book 10 years earlier ended with her swearing revenge on Pet Force.
We cut back to the comic strip world, and Garfield is pondering how much he may have missed out on life, not getting involved. Arlene assures Garfield not to worry, because he hasn't missed out on her. Aw, that was kind of sweet. Fireworks from Dorkon suddenly send a bunch of space dust underneath Garfield and Arlene, causing them to float up. And despite all my gripes about the movie, this is actually kind of a nice sequence. Garfield and Arlene have a third and final dance in outer space, closing out the Garfield direct-to-DVD trilogy. Oh, and since Marvel popularized comic book movies having stingers at the end, we get a mid-credits scene showing that Betty has snuck into the Pet Force universe and is still chasing after Garzuka. And then Nermal asks the director if he can have Betty's job. That was actually kind of funny, I have to admit. So that was Garfield's Pet Force. In a movie that's 77 minutes long, we get 3 short action scenes with Pet Force that don't even last a minute, and it takes a non-superpowered Garfield to save the day in the end. What? Garfield? This was super lame! This was nothing like the books! How could Jim Davis screw up a Pet Force movie so much? I'm gonna go into speculation mode right now. I'm starting to think that Jim Davis wasn't really that involved with Pet Force. If you watched my History of Pet Force video, I mentioned that it was actually Gary Barker, his assistant artist who first drew Garfield as a superhero. Mark Acey, a Garfield writer, helped develop the characters, and Michael Teitelbaum was the one who actually wrote the Pet Force books. I'm starting to think that Jim Davis's real role with Pet Force back in the 90s was to just approve the work other people were doing for him. So when it came time for him to do the movie, where he was the sole writer, he probably just went with his own ideas and they were all pretty crappy. And it's a shame because a lot of the jokes in this movie I think actually do work. It feels like the kind of humor you'd see on Garfield and Friends. So not all of Jim Davis's writing was horrible. The biggest disappointment with the Garfield's Pet Force movie, it's not just all the changes it makes. It's that it just didn't capture the fun of the original books. I mean, part of what made these books so fun to read was just seeing how Garfield and everyone else, bounce off each other when they're turned into superheroes. Seeing how non-superhero characters deal with having superpowers and constantly bickering and infighting and everything. And since Pet Force is barely in their own movie, you don't get to see any of that. They could have easily made Garfield and Nermal foils for one another in the movie. Garfield's the one who doesn't want to help out, and Nermal is the one who's most eager to be a superhero, and maybe he learns something with great power comes great responsibility. As Batman once said. Not only that, I think this movie was wrong to portray Garfield as being so lazy that he doesn't care about other people's problems. I mean, if you watch Garfield and Friends or the TV specials, Garfield is constantly helping other people. One of his biggest hero moments was when he saved John from a panther in his TV special Garfield on the Rough. And that was written by Jim Davis. So Jim Davis apparently forgotten how he's characterized Garfield. I'm also disappointed that Garfield never got to become Garzuka, although I imagine Jim Davis made that change so that the movie wouldn't be too similar to the outrageous origin. And to also show that you don't have to have superpowers to be a hero. And it's possible maybe he was inspired by the first Iron Man movie, where Tony Stark has his girlfriend Pepper Potts help him kill the villain Obadiah Stane. Maybe that's what Jim Davis was trying to go for, but still, in a movie called Garfield's Pet Force, based on the book series from the 90s, I expect Pet Force to be front and center saving the day, not a non-superpowered Garfield. So how's Garfield's Pet Force rank against the other two movies? Probably lower. Garfield Gets Real and Garfield's Fun Fest deal with Garfield's life as a comic strip character, and they feel more true to Garfield's spirit. Pet Force, on the other hand, is a complete departure, and it doesn't do the original Pet Force books any justice. I feel like maybe Jim Davis knew that this was going to be the last Garfield DVD movie, and he wanted to go out on some big final hurrah, and instead, it was just a total mess. Oh well. That's all I have to say about Garfield's Pet Force. Well, we did it, Garfield. We got through all your DVD movies. Thank you so much for sticking around with me. And I want to thank you all for sticking around and watching all my reviews. Maybe in the future... What? Incoming transmission? This is weird. I didn't know my computer could get...
Hello, Peter.
Ah! Jim Davis! What are you doing here?
Just checking up on my worst fan ever. I've been watching your Garfield movie reviews, and I'm very displeased with what you've been saying about them. How dare you accuse me of having no involvement in the creation of Pet Force? Don't you realize how much hard work it was for me to strike an amazing deal with Scholastic, and almost ruined my voice barking orders at Gary Barker and everyone else doing those books? Anyway, I came back because you're still in possession of something that belongs to me.
What is it? Are you still mad at me that I stole Garfield's Judgment Day from you?
Well, duh. I was gonna have my friend Vice President Pence send a squad of ninjas to retrieve the book from you, and then President Trump would take you prisoner and deport you to Abu Dhabi. However, I decided to be merciful and make a deal with you, and it's not negotiable. I'll leave you alone and let you keep that book if you stop doing videos and pretending to talk to a Garfield doll like it's really him. I'm the only one who can talk to Garfield.
Yeah, pretending.
Shut up! I figured out your secret, and you're no real Garfield fan.
What secret? What are you talking about?
Don't play dumb with me. You couldn't have broken into the Positing Vault and steal Garfield's Judgment Day on your own. You must have had help from someone who knows the ins and outs of our security, and after several months, I finally figured it out.
Oh no, I think he's got us.
You're a pawn of Bill Watterson!
What? Bill Watterson? You mean the Calvin Hobbes guy?
Yes, Bill Watterson has never liked how I merchandise Garfield so much, and it broke my heart when he said U.S. Acres was an abomination. But now that Garfield is the most syndicated comic strip in the world, Watterson is too cowardly to come out of retirement and criticize me openly. So he must have created you to do his dirty work by being the Chris Chan of the Garfield fandom. I suspect he somehow got a hold of the blueprints of the security systems in Paz Inc. and had you steal Garfield's Judgment Day just to make my company look inept against a crazy fanboy. And to make it worse, he made you into a furry Satanist to make Garfield's readers look deranged and take my comics' family-friendly image!
Hey, who are you to say that I'm family unfriendly when you're putting boobies jokes into your movies?
And I'm not a Satanist. This is a cross of St. Peter, not a Satanist cross. He was crucified upside down.
Yeah, right. Upside-down crucifixion sounds so much better for children than Satanism. Anyway, I don't want to talk to you anymore. I need to get back to work on the next Garfield movie with Alcon Entertainment. It's gonna be so amazing, it will blow your socks off. Watterson will regret ever mocking me with a disgusting furry like you. Davis out!
Is he gone? Oh, phew. That was a close one, Garfield. For a moment I thought Jim Davis was gonna find out that you helped me steal Garfield's Judgment Day. What was all that stuff about Bill Watterson? That was weird. What? You can't be serious. You told Jim Davis that? This whole time you've been telling Jim Davis that I'm a pawn of Bill Watterson in order to protect our relationship? Garfield, that is the most insane and awesome lie you've ever told. I didn't know you cared that much about me. Don't be ridiculous. Oh, so let me get this straight. What you're saying is you've actually been telling Jim Davis these kinds of lies for years, just because you think it's funny. Well, can't you at least admit that protecting me is a good side benefit? Oh. Well, I'm sorry about that interruption, folks. Garfield, could you hack Jim Davis's computer so he can't see what I'm doing on YouTube anymore? Okay, good. Anyway, Pretty the Cat here. I hope you all enjoyed my reviews. Bye, everybody, and maybe in the future I'll review that Alcon Entertainment Garfield movie. I don't care what Jim Davis thinks.